What are you hearing in the ethers about the theaters and the state of theaters and how that's going to go?
The theaters are starting to reopen, of course, as we know. The fact that you guys are here is evidence of that. But in terms of, the main chain movie theaters, and it's been a very, very tough time for them and for every other business out there, obviously. But we've seen movie theaters reopening. None of them yet doing full capacity. It's social distancing. I think they're actually doing a great job. I've been to a couple of theaters in Chicago and seen the process. I mean, they're very adamant about making sure their staff is trained, about cleaning the theaters between showings, about having, and the socially distanced seating in theaters is something that I'm in favor of anyway. Right. Even if there weren't any health concerns. You know what I'm saying? I don't need to be near a lot of people.
But what about those people that always sit next to you when there's 500 seats?
Oh, I don't care for those people.
I
don't care for those people.
Yeah.
People asked me years ago where the best place is to watch a movie in a theater. And my late great friend and colleague Roger Ebert said you should always be at least 2 times as far back as the width of the screen. That's sort of a basic rule of thumb. And I agreed with that, although I always say I also like the back row of the theater. First of all, if you're in a cool kind of sloped movie theater and you're watching something like a big action movie or any kind of event film, it's kind of cool to see the audience reacting to it. But also, that means there'll be no idiot kicking your seat behind you if you're in the last row. You got to think about that.
Yeah, see?
It's a key factor.
That is a key factor. As somebody who covered the Oscars for decades and went to 8, you were on the red carpet for 8, weren't you?
Yeah, 8 or 9.
8 or 9, something along that.
Yeah.
Give us some favorite moments before we get to the list and have.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the candidates and the ballot and all that stuff, because I know a lot of people have Oscar pools and there's still time to fill them out. But it was interesting when I covered the Oscars in person, and I'll just a quick little bit of background for folks who don't know, either here with us live or on the stream. I came up in Chicago as a general interest columnist and news reporter and covered everything from sports to pop culture. In a great time, kind of the last golden era. Those things are still going great. But when I joined the Sun-Times and the Tribune had a combined circulation of over 1 million every day. And it was still kind of the great newspaper rivalries. And Roeper was at the Tribune.
And Rich had page 11. I would always go to page 11 to read your column.
And Jennifer's father, of course, the legendary Tim Weigel, who had started as a broadcast and print journalist and got back into it, but was always such a fan of newspapers and writing, and he was actually the person who introduced me to Mike Roeper and a lot of other people, because I'd see Tim down at the Billy Goat. But when I came up, I got to do a lot of cool things as a general interest columnist and I covered political conventions and sporting events. I was at the Tyson Holyfield fight in Vegas. I would get to go to, I covered the OJ trial. So I'd been to a lot of different events. And then I got the job with Roger Ebert eventually, and we would, of course, go out to the Academy Awards, which, again, for a kid that grew up loving movies and watching the Oscars, we all remember watching the Oscars on TV. It was like, stepping inside of, it's like the Wizard of Oz. You're like, what am I doing inside of this here? And for me, one of the cool things about covering the Oscars was I was there from 99 to about 2009. I've been back a couple times since then, but it was the last era, too, just before the complete social media explosion. There was already some blogging, and Facebook was out there, Twitter in the late 2000s. But
you had your StarTech phone. Remember the StarTech? It was like a flip phone.
Yeah. It's funny. The little sidebar. In around 1997, Tom Cruise did a movie premiere, and Tom Cruise is one of the all-time marketing geniuses, so he would fly around the world. It was like 97, 98, 99, somewhere around there. He had done a movie premiere in Tokyo, and I saw all these photos of all these crazed fans holding their phones up, and I thought they were doing some sort of weird phone tribute, and they were taking pictures, because you used to have phones that you could have 10 photos maximum on them, right? So what are they doing? They're taking pictures. Yeah. So when I was out there covering the Oscars, it was still a huge thing, but you had to watch it on ABC. There wasn't a ton of different, adjacent things, and even when I got lucky enough to go to after parties and stuff, nobody was taking out their phone and taking pictures. So you kind of felt like it was the last bit of old time Hollywood. In terms of the Oscars themselves, they're usually, and we'll talk a little bit about the changes this year, but they're usually at they had been at the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion, but then the Kodak and now Dolby Theater. So they close off, and you see this on TV, they close off all the traffic there on Hollywood and Highland. They put the red carpet down. And it looks so glamorous. And the reality is when you go there any other time of the year, you realize that theater's in a mall. It's like next to Sephora, and they just kind of cover all that up to make it look so super glamorous. But to cover the Oscars, especially after 9/11, because as you know, like any event now has, triple security. Things are fenced off and everything. So Roger and I would do coverage for not only ABC Chicago, but KABC, which is the big affiliate out there. And they do a show that's syndicated to 250 countries. And because they're going to every time zone imaginable, they start their pre-Oscar coverage like at 10 o'clock in the morning and go till 3 o'clock at night. They're like, and now we're live in Sri Lanka. You got to do the same thing all over again. So the way it's set up, you see that on the red carpet, it looks all glamorous from the point of view of the cameras. But all of us schmoes who are doing the interviews, we each get 18 inches of space behind those hedges, which are plastic. They're not real. You see that, all that greenery there. And you got 18 inches. And if you go 1 inch over this way, you'll bump into Pat O'Brien. And if you go 1 inch over this way, you'll run into somebody from Entertainment Tonight. So you have to be like this. And the stars come down the red carpet, and you've got a director in your ear saying, grab this person. And then you got a publicist coming up saying, I have Tom Hanks coming, just a moment. And you get like 14 seconds with them. There's literally no journalism you could do. And I told myself, though, the one thing I would never do, I would always have some question, other than just like, what's it like to be nominated? And I also told myself, I'm never going to ask anything about fashion. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. And then like 2005, Jennifer Lopez is in front of me, and I heard myself saying the words, who are you wearing? And I wanted to kill myself at that moment. No. I'm like, here I am. But I'll tell you another fun thing about the red carpet. And again, you see like the last half hour when all the big stars come late because it's a big ego battle. Like, they don't want to get too early, but they want to get in there. But every year, for many, many years, and there's a deal with the Academy Awards, there's about 2,600 seats normally. So even if you've been nominated in the past, you might not get invited, or if you're not acting or directing, currently. But they do have a nice thing. If you've won an Academy Award, you'll be invited every single year. It's sort of like if you win the Masters, right? You get the invite.
It's a courtesy invite, yeah.
Yeah. So Ernest Borgnine. Who remembers Ernest Borgnine? I'm sure some folks do.
Yeah.
One of the, yeah, Mikhail Zadie. Well, he won the Academy Award, I believe the year was 1955 for Marty, which, by the way, to this day is just this wonderful film and a brilliant performance. But it was 1955. We had 48 states in 1955. Hawaii and Alaska hadn't gotten the call yet, okay? So it was a while ago. General Eisenhower was the president, okay? But God bless him. We lost him about around 2012. But for 50 years, Ernest Borgnine would show up at the Oscars at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon with his tuxedo and come down the red carpet because the press was dying to talk to anybody because we'd already talked to Wolfgang Puck about what he's serving.
His pizzas, yeah.
And, who else is going to be that? So here we come walking down the red carpet. We're like, Academy Award winner, Ernest Borgnine. Oh, do you want to talk to me? And it was like, there was something actually kind of sweet about it. He was like, you know what? I'm going to be a movie star once a year. Absolutely. He was long since retired pretty much at that point. And it was kind of great. So you'd say, what was it like when you made Marty 9 years after the end of World War II? Right. Well, it was a great picture,
Gotta love him for showing up. I love it. Here's to Marty. And that's another one. I was going to ask Rich if there is a movie that from the archives from the past where there were some nominations or some winners, what would you recommend? But let's get to what we got first, and then we'll leave people with some ideas.
Sure.
You've been watching way too many things at home, and not everybody has seen a lot of the movies, but I know there are some must-see. So out of many that you had to screen in this pandemic, what were some of the favorite standouts that you're so happy to see on these lists?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jen. And the one, again, we're talking all in terms of silver linings, but as you guys know, in the past, when the nominations would be announced, in most cases, they're not the big commercial films. And if you're not lucky enough to be in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago, these films might not have even played in theaters near you. So if you're a big movie fan, you say, oh my God, I got to rush out to the theater and see these movies before the Oscars, because I want to have a rooting interest. This this year, every single one of the films that's nominated is available on home video one way or another, whether it's on Netflix or video on demand or what they call virtual cinema, because that's the way that things have changed. So you go through the nominees, you can see all these before the Oscars. I'll talk about a couple of things that I thought were overlooked first, if you don't
Okay,
mind.
yes, please. The overlooked movies from the 2020.
I was really. Did anybody get the chance to see *The Five Bloods*, the Spike Lee film?
Yeah, we still see
Delroy
some hands.
Lindo, who's one of our best actors for so many years, I thought for sure he deserved and was going to get a nomination. And because the movie came out like last June, it just seemed like so long ago, I think, and almost got forgotten. I was surprised by that. News of the World is another great film. Tom Hanks didn't get nominated, and I think Tom Hanks has gotten into that territory where he's won twice, although it was 25 years ago when he won back-to-back for Philadelphia and Forrest Gump. He doesn't get nominated that much anymore. Once in a while he will, but he's so good, so regularly, so often that I think the Academy goes, well, yeah, Tom Hanks was amazing in News of the World, but he's won twice before. He's been nominated before. Let's give somebody else a nomination. So there's some overlooked films. I thought One Night in Miami, Leslie Odom Jr., who, if you saw Hamilton, he was Aaron Burr in Hamilton, and he plays Sam Cooke, and he got nominated. But I thought the film was going to get nominated,
and the film did not.
And it did not. But overall, I think the Academy did an amazing job. When we can talk a little bit about the Academy, you might remember 4 or 5 years ago, there was the whole Oscars so white protest because 2 years in a row, all 20 acting nominees were Caucasian. So that was 40 straight nominees. And I give the Academy a lot of credit because they listened. And first of all, they expanded their membership from about 7,500 to almost 10,000. Tons of women and persons of color were invited to join and should have been all along. So you now have a somewhat younger and more diverse voting Academy, and it's reflected in the nominations. Of the 20 acting nominees this year, 9 are persons of color. And that's not because the Academy is saying, oh, we've got to make this more inclusive. It's because there have been more opportunities in the last few years for actors,
and directors too. There have never been this many female directing nominees.
There were only 3 female nominees nominated for Best Director ever. There's 2 this year. Emerald Fennell for Promising Young Woman. Do you guys watch The Crown? Do people watch The Crown? Have you seen The Crown? She's Camilla Parker in The Crown. Emerald Fennell. So she's a wonderful actress, but she's also an amazing director. So,
cool tidbit.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think the guy that plays Prince Charles should be with her, even though they're not together in real life, for the Academy Awards. And then Chloe Zhao for Nomadland is nominated as well. So you see the changing landscape of Hollywood reflected in the nominations this year.
Well, speaking of changing landscapes, it's where are they having it, and who's going to be live, and how is this going to be? Is anyone going to be there in person?
Yeah, it's very different. It's the Emmys and the Grammys and the Golden Globes. They tried their best. They host in different areas and trying to do things via Zoom or any kind of video chat, and the ratings have reflected that a lot of people kind of miss all that silly escapism of the red carpet and also the huge audience and everything. So it's kind of a hybrid for the Oscars. They still are not going to have 2,500 people there. They're going to have some things from the Dolby Theater, but most of the attendees will only be the nominees, and they can bring a guest, and the presenters, and there's no host again. But they're going to do it at Union Station in downtown Los Angeles, the train station, which might seem a little odd, but if you watch movies, you've seen Union Station in the movies. It's this incredibly gorgeous Art Deco structure, and the interior is this
There's no Sephora at Union Station.
Yeah. The amazing thing is they're going to keep the trains running, but that's going to be in a separate area. They really are. They're not going to. The trains must run, but the interior of Union Station in LA has often been something other than a train station. It was a courthouse in The Dark Knight Rises. It was the Miami Bank in Catch Me If You Can, where remember where Leo would go in as the pilot and go in and cash his checks from Pan Am and everything like that. So it's in Blade Runner it was used. So it's been used for tons of movies. It has a lot of history to it. They have a ton of great presenters, all the Oscar winners from last year. I was thinking, it's been so long ago, but it was Joaquin Phoenix for Joker, Renee Zellweger for Judy, Laura Dern for Marriage Story, and Brad Pitt for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And Parasite won Best Picture. But all the 4 previous winners are going to be there. Then they realize, we talked a lot about how there's this international group of nominees and everything. There are at least a dozen nominees who are overseas, many of them in Europe. They can't get here. The UK still has restrictions on travel. If you got here, you'd have to quarantine for 14 days. It became too complex, so they're going to have kind of a hub in London. So you'll see a lot of the nominees there, and they're trying to discourage the Zoom chat thing, but I think some people are going to have to be there via video.
Interesting. So with that change, do you think that we can recover back a year from now? I mean, obviously it all depends on how things go down with the pandemic, but do you think that there's enough interest to try to bring it back, or will we, like many people are now permanently working from home, just make it a more at-home experience?
No, I think that by next year, by 2022, you'll have a full-fledged Oscars with 2,500 people in attendance. They are going to even do the red carpet this year, but again, it's going to be like 20 reporters, no fans in the bleachers. But no, I think they'll bring it back all the way. I will say this: I don't know if we're ever going to get a host for the Oscars again, right? Because
there have been some bad ones.
Well, the other thing is, and I talked to somebody, I don't want to say his name, but it rhymes with Timmy Jimmel. Who has hosted in the past, and he made the point that it's kind of a no-win situation now. Here's one thing for sure. One thing, they don't really pay the Oscars host. It's just a great honor and a great exposure. So it's not like you get $1 million. You don't really get paid to do it. And in most cases, whether it's been like Billy Crystal or before that, back in the day, Johnny
Whoopi.
Carson, Whoopi, Steve Martin and Alec Baldwin, Ellen, Jimmy Kimmel, they spend like 6 weeks preparing for the Oscars. They get their own writing staffs together. They work on monologues and jokes and things they're going to do. And you do all that in this day and age, and if you say one thing that somebody takes
ruffles
the wrong
feathers,
way,
yeah,
it's just almost not worth the controversy. And no matter what you do when you're hosting the Oscars, even the best hosts, you're really just a traffic cop. You come out and do a 10-minute opening number, and the rest of the time you're just moving, one thing to the next. So they almost never get great reviews. So I think they really don't need a host. You just have different presenters. But I think other than that, they will go back to the traditional format of a live audience and a big red carpet. And all of this is silly, but it's great escapism. And we found that out, I think, even more during this pandemic. I mean, I know as a sports fan, but especially as a baseball fan, last year felt like sort of a half season, not just because it was a half season in terms of games, but to not have the fans in the stands was just such a different thing. And the networks try to do different things like pipe in, soundtrack of people.
Oh yeah, people cheering and cardboard cutouts.
It just didn't work.
Yeah.
And even though now it's 25% or 30%. For example, I'm a huge White Sox fan, Chicago White Sox fan, and Carlos Rodon throws a no-hitter in front of a live crowd the other night, and watching that even just from home was really cool. So, we need, I think, the escapism, whether it's sports or entertainment, and that's another reason why so many of these movies have been such enormous hits on streaming platforms, because people say, well, okay, these films came out, but they didn't get a theatrical release. And there's nothing more important than seeing movies in theaters. But when we can't, at least there's this option. If this had happened 40 years ago, the industry just would have shut down completely.
I'm sitting here looking at the list, and everybody, I hope you have the list. And like we said, we are going to give a bottle of wine if you want, or a gift certificate to the theater you choose. But just be sure to put your name and an email address on your contact sheet here so I can find you and gift you if you win. But looking at Best Picture, what are some of your standouts? I know that, there's like who's going to win. And
I haven't seen any of these, but let me take a look here. Okay, so Best Picture. You guys got your ballots with you, right? Mm-hmm. Of this group of nominees, first of all, it's a terrific list. There are some years where there are certain films and performances nominated where I personally, Bohemian Rhapsody, would not have included them. That's just me. But this is a great group. But when you look at films like Sound of Metal, which, by the way, if you haven't a chance to see it, it's really cool. Riz Ahmed playing this heavy metal musician, right? And who's losing his hearing. And Paul Raci was a local Chicago area stage and kind of supporting actor, a guy that you might have seen once in a while, but nobody knows his name. And he's like 71. And he got nominated for an Academy Award. That's Just
Awesome.
cool shit right there. And I'm happy for him. But most of these films really, you know, the cliche about an honor to be nominated, there's almost no chance for them. The favorite is Nomadland, which I love. Did you guys get a chance to see that?
Clap your hands if you liked.
Nomadland, if you've seen it.
Yes. Or I say we.
Which is a fascinating slice of American life based on a true story set in the late 2000s, right after the big financial crisis. And Frances McDormand, who's a national treasure, plays a woman who's lost her husband, lost her home, is working part-time jobs, and kind of joins this nomad community in the Southwest, people living out of their vans and RVs, and they kind of support each other. You do this service for me, I'll trade these goods for you. I think it's a beautiful film. It's sometimes tough to watch because people are going through some tough stuff. There's been this recent controversy where they're like, well, they don't really talk that much about, you know, because she works part-time for Amazon. She gets part-time work. And in the nonfiction book, that's a bigger part of the movie. That's not what the movie's about. So I don't, you know, to me, that's a side issue. It's a beautiful film. Nomadland's the favorite right now. The other film I think that has a chance of winning is The Trial of the Chicago 7, which is another film that got some criticism because people say, well, it's not historically accurate. Some things that happen in that movie, that's not how it really happened. And I always say, well, you know, there's life and there's movies. And The Trial of Chicago 7 took place over several months and covers events that took place over a couple of years. And the movie's at 2.5 hours. So like every other movie in the history of movies, things are condensed. Sometimes there are composite characters. Dialogue is imagined. Even documentaries have to compress events. I was very, very young, so I wasn't, you know, I can't say I remember all of the events, but I've been a student of those events and have talked to people who were there. There are still a lot of public officials, lawyers, cops who were there who have told me that they think it's very accurate. And The Trial of Chicago 7 is kind of a classic Oscar-type picture, too, because it is a historical biopic. It does cover a pivotal period in American history. It does have a great ensemble cast. And it's a courtroom drama, which Hollywood loves. And Aaron Sorkin, who wrote and directed, of course, you know, you remember A Few Good Men. He won the Academy Award for his screenplay for A Social Network. So that's the kind of film that voters, because they still have a lot of traditional voters, will look at and maybe vote for. But I think Nomadland will win Best Picture. So it's up to you. Mark your ballot.
Mark your ballot accordingly. And it's interesting because we were going to do Chicago 7 here. We wanted to make that a presentation for you all, but they were going to charge us $400. And so as an effort to we objected to that. So that would have made the price ticket double, and so we decided to keep it.
You can
go
watch
home
it on
and
Netflix.
watch it at Netflix.
You can get it on Netflix
exactly.
right now.
We were trying to follow protocol. Okay, Best Director. Who you leaning on?
Well, we talked about Best Director too, and the fact that there are 2 women nominated. I mentioned Chloe Zhao for Nomadland, and not always, but usually, Best Picture and Best Director go hand in hand. Sometimes it happens. Like when Argo won Best Picture, Ben Affleck, he won the Academy Award because he was a producer on Argo, but he wasn't nominated for Best Director. So, and I always wonder, like, how can a film be nominated for Best Picture, but not Best Director? Who directed this movie?
Right.
But Chloe Zhao, I think, will win for Best Director, and the picture will win. I think that's the way to go there.
Okay, that's a good way to go.
Yeah.
Actor.
Yeah.
I'm just going all out of order. I hope you're.
No,
cool with
no,
that.
I don't mind at all. Well, Best Actor.
Do you need your list?
A couple of things. I've got the ballot right here. I'll tell a quick.
Please.
Sidebar right here.
Please.
Like, you know, you talk about this all the time. This goes back 30 some years. Roger Ebert told me this story. So Roger and Gene were on the Tonight Show for the first time. This would have been like early 80s, I would have guessed. Johnny Carson Tonight Show. And they're backstage, and you know, the show's picking up a lot of momentum and has been syndicated nationwide, but this is still a big deal for them. They're backstage, and the producer comes by and he goes, "Okay, guys, we're just going to start off by asking you what, you know, some of your favorite movies are this year." And the 2 of them went, "I can't think of anything. I can't what?" And they're frantically calling the producer back in Chicago. "What do we like? What did we like?" So I always make sure after hearing that story, have the backup with you, just in case.
What did we like?
So Best Actor, well, I mean, we got to start off by talking about Chadwick Boseman for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. We lost him. That, of course, is the real tragedy, and he's the odds-on favorite, but I don't think it's because it's one of these posthumous awards like when Peter Finch won for Network years ago. It's the best performance. It's the best performance of his career. It's transcendent work. He's amazing in it. When you watch Chadwick Boseman in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, and you have the, you know, the hindsight, you realize because he had been sick on the last 4 or 5 movies he's done, and he's so thin. And you look at it and you go, oh God, we didn't know it at the time except for the people close to him. He chose not to talk about his illness. That's his choice. So when he died, other than people that really knew him or people that worked on movies, they did know. It was still a shock, but he's going to win, the Best Actor Academy Award, and it'll be an amazing moment when his wife, I'm sure, will accept for him. I also want to talk, though, in Best Actor about Anthony Hopkins in The Father, and this is a film about a man, Anthony Hopkins, essentially playing someone his own age in his 80s, who is going through kind of the middle and then latter stages of dementia. And it is an amazing performance. And I think it's one of the best films about someone going through that you've ever seen. And Olivia Colman, who won the Academy Award a few years ago for The Favorite, and also is in The Crown. You see her. And it was a great actress, plays his daughter. It is an incredible performance. And when people talk about Anthony Hopkins, he's had one of the greatest careers in the history of stage and screen. Everybody always remembers The Silence of the Lambs, which is an amazing performance. But this, to me, might be the best performance of Anthony Hopkins' career. So,
a little Anthony Hopkins sidebar. Yeah. I just recently found all these air checks from back when I used to do these movie junkets where they would give you, 4 minutes with Bruce Willis and try to make it seem like, or Tom Hanks, that you spent the day with them, and they were kicking you out of the hotel room and you were in line. It's like an assembly line to sit down with these people. And so I did all those movies. It was New York or LA or whatever when I worked at WGN in the morning news and then CBS after that. So I think about 2 years of my life was spent in those press junkets. So, Gwyneth Paltrow from Shakespeare in Love. And but I forgot Ben Affleck is in that movie for 2 seconds. It's so that's another great one to watch. Shakespeare in Love. What a great movie. But Anthony Hopkins in Meet Joe Black, where Brad Pitt shows up as the angel of death to basically tell him that he's going to go and he's going to step out. And was it Claire Forlani? There's a name you haven't heard in a while, plays the daughter. And so I was watching these, and I asked Anthony Hopkins, would you feel like there's anything you haven't done, or do you feel like you've got it all taken care of or something? And he's like, I've done it all. And that was 20 years ago. So he's done a lot since. What an amazing
he's
actor.
Someone, too, who has gotten on social media recently. And you should follow Anthony Hopkins because he's a delight. He'll be playing the piano. Or when he got his vaccine, he was all proud. He had his little mask on and everything. And I was like, not the first time you've been wheeled out in a mask in a public situation, Dr. Lecter.
That's so great. All right, Best Actress.
Best Actress. The nominees are...
Do you need my readers? They're really small.
Just kidding.
Okay. Do you need my readers? They're
No,
here.
no, I was
They're
just
from
kidding.
Walgreens.
I was just kidding.
Okay. Go ahead.
This is actually, in a lot of years, we know who's going to win because they've won everything else leading up to this. And you're like, okay, it's
Right.
like last year, everybody knew Joaquin Phoenix was going to win for Joker. Everybody knew Renee Zellweger was going to win, etc. It's very close this year. The nominees are Viola Davis for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Andra Day for The United States versus Billie Holiday, Vanessa Kirby for Pieces of a Woman, Frances McDormand for Nomadland, and Carey Mulligan for Promising Young Woman. And they actually have betting sites now where they handicap these, and they're all within, very close odds of one another. Mm-hmm. I would say this: Viola Davis won't win for Ma Rainey's Black Bottom only because, and this is a very cool thing, she's getting close to that Meryl Streep thing where, first of all, she's won before, but voters look at her and go, she's going to get nominated probably 5 or 6 more times in her career. She'll have other chances.
She's not done yet.
And sometimes they look at other actors or actresses and say, this might be the one time where it's a marriage of role and performance, and we should reward them now. Audrey Day, in the United States versus Billie Holiday. It's an amazing performance because she's a Grammy-winning singer and actually sings the songs in the movie, which you did not get with Rami Malek in Bohemian Rhapsody, and you did not get with Renee Zellweger in Judy. They didn't really sing. There was some melding of voices, etc. And she doesn't try to imitate Billie Holiday. She puts her own spin on it, but it's incredible.
Oh my God, and she drank and smoked, and she got really method about it.
Well, and again, it's a Hollywood biopic, and as we just saw last year with Judy, and we saw with Ray and a lot of other films, Hollywood loves movies about Hollywood. Mm-hmm. I don't think she's going to win. She definitely is a contender. I think it's going to be Carey Mulligan for Promising Young Woman, Frances McDormand, she's a lead. She's a great actress, and she's in a movie. I said it's going to win
Is she
Best
the favorite
Picture.
in Vegas?
She is between her and Carey Mulligan, but Frances has won twice. She won for Fargo, and she won just a few years ago for 3 Billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri. So I think, again, voters will look at it. And Carey Mulligan's really good in Promising Young Woman, and it's a very, of its moment film touching on a lot of issues. But it's also like she's been nominated once before, but she's not somebody that gets nominated all the time. And she's also doing the old school Hollywood thing, which I respect. She's out there campaigning. She's out there, she hosted Saturday Night Live recently, which is the classic kind of way to get your word out there. And by the way, I think a lot of people didn't realize she's married to a Mumford.
Oh, really?
What people, because the Mumford showed up at SNL, right? She's Carey Mulligan Mumford. Who knew? Right. But it's a great performance in a hot button film. So I think Carey Mulligan wins.
Okay. We kind of skipped the, I was going to go to screenplay and we didn't do those.
Actress in a supporting role.
Right. Do you want to do supporting actor, actress, or do you want to go to screenplays?
Let's do actress in a supporting role. Okay. We have, now this is interesting too, because a year and a half ago, everybody thought Glenn Close was going to win for sure for Hillbilly Elegy. It's a prestige film. She's been nominated 7 times before. She's never won. This is her turn. Then the movie came out. I actually liked it, but a lot of people despised it. So it lost a lot of momentum. So I don't think she's going to win. I think she's going to have to wait for another time. I mentioned Olivia Colman in The Father. She might win again, even though she just won for The Favorite a couple of years ago, because she's so good and she's so beloved by voters. And also it's a way to honor the film and Anthony Hopkins, who probably aren't going to win. So she's got a chance there, too. Amanda Seyfried's the best thing about Mank. But then there is Yoo Jung-yoon in Minari, who plays the grandmother, if you haven't seen the film. First of all, she's a beloved actress and is known in her homeland, but not so much here. But it's the kind of role that wins an Academy Award, because it's the wisecracking, tough grandma who sets things straight. I think she's going to win it.
Wow. And any surprises in screenplay? Like any coming up from behind?
Well, screenplay, I think that, it's interesting, too, because we go back to when the voters are casting their picks, they think, okay, well, I didn't vote for this there, but I'll vote for it here. So I think in this case, The Trial of Chicago 7, Aaron Sorkin could get the screenplay Oscar because it's probably not going to win Best Picture. So that's a way of honoring the film. So I think he probably wins for Best Screenplay. You see that a lot, where a film with 7 or 8 nominations gets 1 win, and it's the voter thinking, well, I didn't vote in that category for it, but I do want to honor the film, recognize the film, so I'll vote for it in this category.
Out of the other nominations for Best Picture, is there any behind-the-scenes stories that you've heard through your work that you've done in the grapevine, or even with the director nominees or the actor nominees, that's kind of one of those things that maybe not everybody, mainstream media, has gotten a hook on?
Well, I'll just say this. I have a thing about, this, Jen, about movies that are set here in Chicago but filmed elsewhere. Right? I take that personally because, first of all, it costs jobs here, and sometimes you can just tell. Now, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom is set in Chicago. It was not filmed here, but it's mostly an interior film, so it's okay. They have a couple of studio location shots that aren't exact. Judas versus the Black Messiah. Cleveland stands in for Chicago, and there are some exterior shots where you're just like, that's not Chicago, and it takes you out of the film. But for The Trial of Chicago 7, I talked to Aaron Sorkin quite a bit about the film. And some of it he did film in New Jersey, certain scenes. But he told me that if he couldn't get permission, and it was Rom before it was Lori Lightfoot when they were first talking about the film, he said if he couldn't get permission to film in Grant Park and on Michigan Avenue, where the actual protests that led to the trial, was the protest during the 1968 Democratic Convention. He said, if I couldn't film there, he goes, I wouldn't do the movie. He goes, it would be disrespectful to everybody on both sides to try to make some other part of the country look like Chicago. So I love that. I love and admire when you find a way to do the film, and it's expensive. A lot of times the reason why, and you guys, I'm sure you've heard a lot about the controversy about filming in Georgia. And the reason Georgia became, the Hollywood of the South was they offered amazing tax incentives, like 30% better than other places. And regardless of the politics, if you go back 20 years, I give all the credit in the world to whoever was running the Georgia Film Office. because most of the Marvel Universe movies, Black Panther was shot in Georgia. You know, and obviously there's a lot of CGI and green screen and everything. Ozark, which is a show I love. You guys watch Ozark on Netflix with Jason Bateman? Ozark is filmed in Georgia, even though it's Ozark. So you would think, I know where they filmed that. They shot that in the Ozarks. And they do a couple of drone shots that, you know, and you can do that. You see that all the time with movies where, you know, if movies set in Chicago, they do 5 or 6 overhead shots. Here's all the bridges along the Chicago River. Here's the skyline you see for the lake. Oh, there's the L train. We're in Chicago. And then they cut to something where you can see the Space Needle in the background. And you're like, they're not in Chicago.
Well, the last time we were here, we were talking about The Fugitive, and then we screened The Fugitive. And that's like all shot here except for the train scene. And if you could retell that story just briefly.
Yeah, The Fugitive, which is, I think, you know, not just one of the great Chicago movies of all time, but just holds up as one of the great action films. And the reason we talked about it last time was it was right around St. Patrick's Day, and it has that great scene at the St. Patrick's Day parade, which was a real parade, and they got permission to film there. And you just can't, you know, you can't do a CGI of Roland Burris, you know, and these other Chicago politicians. And the parade obviously knew they were doing it. They didn't tell everybody who was in the parade. So, you know, there are people.
This would never happen today legally, because people would be like, I'm sorry, I was a member of the union and my face was in it for 4 seconds.
So, you know, when you watch Harrison Ford and Tommy Lee Jones running through
an actual parade,
you can tell, like, people are like,
what the heck?
What is happening? But they did such a great job. I thought one of the brilliant things about that Andrew Davis did with The Fugitive too, like if people remember the old TV series, you know, he was trying to find the one-armed man, you know, episode after episode. But what I thought was great about this is they had him hiding in plain sight. And instead of having Dr. Richard Kimball go to California or try to hide in the mountains or something, he came back to Chicago to vindicate himself. So he's the fugitive, and he's right there under their noses. The one scene that wasn't filmed in Illinois is the incredible train bus crash. And you got to remember, this movie came out in 93, I think it was, right around the early 90s. So there was only so much CGI. You know, there was CGI. I mean, the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man wasn't really 40 feet tall in Ghostbusters, but it was limited. So they did mostly what they call practical effects, where you're really seeing things. So they actually staged a scene where a train crashed into a bus, and they used a couple of old buses and a train. But that was filmed in South Carolina, that actual scene. When you watch it, you can tell they filmed it from like 8 different angles, because you don't really get a second take when you've got a train crashing into a bus. But the site in South Carolina where the crash occurred, the train and the bus are still there in the ravine. You can actually visit that site, because when they were done, they're like, well, what do you want to do now? And I guess everyone just kind of ran away. Yeah. But they actually just left it there. And I mean, it's safe and everything.
You can tour it.
You can go and see the bus. Yeah, you won't see Dr. Richard Kimball running away, or, you know, Lieutenant Gerard trying to catch him. But it's a great Chicago film to see that.
So one more Chicago film that would never ever get nominated, because none of John Hughes' movies were ever nominated. But just from selfish circumstances, I recently rewatched The Breakfast Club, and it kind of hit me. First of all, it's really a depressing movie. Like, they're so mad at their parents. But, you know, because of John Hughes and everything that he did, what is your favorite kind of teen angst movie that was shot in Chicago?
Well, I love the John Hughes movie universe, and of course, people go back now and in some cases there's some justified criticism, but you know what he did with films like Pretty in Pink and The Breakfast Club, and even Ferris Bueller's Day Off, was he got in the minds of teenagers in a way that teen comedies before that weren't doing. They were just, you know, kind of cheap exploitation films, you know, with nudity and some swearing, and the kids are all on their last day of school or something. Because even Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I've talked about this before, you know, it's not Ferris Bueller's Day Off, it's Cameron's Day Off. Ferris Bueller can get a day off anytime he wants. He's not absent 9 times, remember that? The whole film is really, this is like people always say, oh, this is your doctoral thesis. But I mean, when you really look at it, Ferris Bueller's Day Off is a best friend doing an intervention for his friend who's borderline suicidal and has serious depression, and dedicates the day to showing Cameron
a good time.
There's so much good out there, And yeah, Ferris is a little shit, and yeah, Ferris is narcissistic and all of that. But really, everything he's doing there is to tell Cameron, you got to stand up for yourself. You got to talk back to your dad one way or another. So there's a pretty cool message in there, and that's the case in all of the John Hughes movies. You mentioned The Breakfast Club. I would think it'd be great. You've seen some of the Ferris Bueller characters in commercials now, like in modern day. But I always thought it was great, like if you showed all the characters from The Breakfast Club, the wrestler and the jock and the outcast and the
Prom queen, yeah.
and the nerd, as parents dropping their kids off for detention. And just take it from there and see what happened to them. Uncle Buck is another film I love. But then again, you see there's a lot going on there in terms of, Amy Madigan, who plays John Candy's girlfriend, longtime girlfriend, and everything, and their relationship, and the kids. Gabby Hoffman, by the way, Macaulay Culkin and Gabby Hoffman as the two kids who went on to have great careers.
And then, of course, the kidnapping of the boyfriend in the trunk and duct taping his face. That's probably not going to happen these days.
And the scene in the school. But years ago, John Hughes talked about the fact that, because people would ask him, like, okay, because everything obviously was set kind of in these Chicago suburbs. And he really did believe that there was kind of a universe there where Samantha from 16 Candles lived a block and a half away from somebody from Pretty in Pink, and Uncle Buck might have known Cameron's dad, that he had them all in his mind kind of living in the same universe.
Same zip code.
Yeah, the same zip code, and and that kind of reality. And Neil Page, who was Steve Martin's character in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, he lived just down the block from the Bueller house, even though in real life, those houses aren't all on similar blocks.
They're sort of similar, nearby
and
suburbs.
And by the way, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is an incredible film, probably the best of all the John.
Which he wrote in one weekend, right?
Yeah, he wrote everything in one weekend. That's what he would do. He would write them in one weekend, and then they would take from there. But that's a film. I recently rewatched that, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And again, you have all that slapstick comedy and all that cringe stuff, and those aren't pillows, and all that stuff with these two characters, and then you get hit in the heart at the end. Spoiler alert: when Steve Martin's character realizes that Dell, that John Candy's character, he's got no home to go to.
No wife, no home.
So many times John Hughes films, they end with a freeze frame on some character, whether it's Uncle Buck or Dell or something, and it's like you realize, like, you got kind of taken in by the comedy but brought home by the drama. Those films actually, I think, resonate even more when you watch them. You're just like, oh, this is wacky. Ferris is crazy. Oh my gosh, Sloan, what's going to happen with them? And then you realize later, like, wow, there was other stuff going on there.
What movies that we have on this ballot sheet do you think is going to have that kind of like staying power, if you will, right? For decades, we're going to be talking about those movies later on.
Boy.
Because some just come and go.
That's a great question, because some films, they do. There's some Best Picture winners that you go, years later, you're like, oh, I forgot that won Best Picture that year. And I do think going back to Nomadland, because it captures a specific time and place and mood of America. And also, by the way, beautifully shot film through the Southwest. And that's one of the kind of themes throughout there. Nomadland is not an anti-American film at all. It's about how this group of Americans who thought they were going to be at a certain place in their life and enjoying retirement took part-time jobs and figured out a way to make it and depended on each other against this, incredible backdrop. And I think Minari the same way, which is based, Minari is based on the director's own stories. The family
Movie
comes over
here,
from Korea. They come, they're going to try. He's going to try to make his way, growing Korean vegetables and fruits and sell them. And there's all kinds of setbacks. But again, it's like kind of the great American dream story. There was a movie in the early 2000s called In America. If anybody has a chance to see that, go back and look at it. It was about it was Jim Sheridan who directed it, and it was all about his actual experiences when his family came over from Ireland and everything they go through. So I think there's certain films like that. Trial of Chicago 7 will resonate because, again, it's kind of timeless because it's set in a different period. And like other films, sometimes they come and go. Going back to last year, and I like Parasite. I didn't fall in love with it like a lot of people did. I think if you go back and look at Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Brad Pitt did win for Best Supporting Actor, but I recently rewatched that film, And as much as Pulp Fiction's always going to be the Tarantino film, it is now routinely listed among the top 25 films of all time, regardless of genre. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is an incredible achievement by Quentin Tarantino, and it's revisionist history, of course, with certain things on purpose, but it captures a certain time and a certain place and a certain mood in America, specifically the late 60s, where so many things were happening at once. We're still in Vietnam, but the economy's pretty great, and movies are still sensational, and we're seeing these young stars like Sharon Tate coming in, but then we're seeing the old guard, as exemplified by the Leonardo DiCaprio character and his loyal best friend. And there's so many things happening in that movie, and the use of music. So when Brad Pitt stopped at the intersection, and Margaret Qualley and the rest of the girls who were Manson girls, and Margaret Qualley, by the way, Andy McDowell's daughter, who looks a lot like her. But she kind of gives him that look. And Mrs. Robinson by Simon and Garfunkel is playing on the radio, because it's kind of like the Mrs. Robinson in reverse there. And Hot August Night at one point is playing, because the Manson murders occurred on a hot August night. And all these things, Kurt Russell's narration and all the stories that go into that, and every bit of TV clip or commercial that you hear is true to that moment. And then even there's so many movies within a movie. The whole scene at the Spahn Ranch where Cliff goes to see, all of that, by the way, is true. The Manson family really did take a precedence there. There really was George Spahn. Burt Reynolds was actually going to play that role and got sick, and Bruce Dern filled in at the last moment. But that's like a movie. That's like a 14-minute movie within a movie. That whole scene, it's amazing. And even you'll see like Lena Dunham all of a sudden for 4 minutes on screen. She's amazing. But I also love the Sharon Tate storyline, because, of course, unfortunately, she met with such a horrific tragedy. But in this movie, we get to see her at the height of excitement about becoming a star, and she goes to the Cinerama and actually goes to see herself on screen, which, by the way, was shut down this week. They might reopen that theater, but that was always there. And even there's a scene that's maybe 6 minutes at the Playboy Mansion, but the details are amazing. Damian Lewis shows up out of nowhere playing Steve McQueen. And they have an actress playing Mama Cass Elliot, who has like a half of a line, but she's perfect. She looks just like her. So the attention to detail and the celebration of Hollywood in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Yeah. Plus, whenever Brad goes and the dog takes care of business, that's great stuff.
That's a good thing.
But I love that film. I think that's actually the film that's going to resonate more. It's like you can go back to 1980. Ordinary People won for Best Picture, another film set not that far from here, and Robert Redford's directorial debut, and certainly a good and solid traditional film. But Raging Bull is the film from 1980 that people watch now. When's the last time anyone said to you, I'm going to rewatch Ordinary People?
I want to cry my eyes out.
I want to see Mary Tyler Moore as the iciest mom ever. Nobody says that, but they're still quoting Pesci and De Niro from Raging Bull.
So you brought up Gene Siskel earlier, and I remember before he passed, because he passed right before my dad passed, and that's just both ironic and sad, because they were colleagues and dear friends and college roommates. So there you go. But he, before he got too sick, recommended, we used to pass around the screeners, which was totally something we shouldn't have done. Yeah, the Academy Award screeners, but back then they were VHSs, okay? So that we would get these piles that Gene would drop off for my dad of the screeners in the VHS pile, and he put a little Post-it on top of Waking Ned Devine. Has anyone heard of that movie? It's just such a sweet Irish story. I would go, yes, you mentioned Ireland, and looking here at your fabulous tattoo, I'm thinking Ireland. So anyway, Waking Ned Devine, if you haven't seen it, was such a sweet story about this town. And it's like, anyway, Gene loved that movie, and he wanted to make sure that we all watched it as a family. And it was such
awesome.
a cute movie that, again, has kind of gotten forgotten in a way. So what are some of your Waking Ned Devines that you want to tell to our audience?
Jeez, I don't know. Now you I'd have to go back and look. I don't know necessarily that they're
even just from the last few years that you've revisited anything that were like, I forgot how good that was.
I'll tell this. First of all, let me tell you a quick Gene and Roger story, and then I'll tell you about one film that I've recently revisited that a little bit under the radar. But I was lucky enough to know Gene and Roger, for years before I ever thought about being on the show, or before the horrible illnesses that eventually took both of them years apart. But people would ask me, because I used to go to screenings to write columns and stuff. So I'd sometimes be in the screening room, and people would ask me like, Was that a shtick with those two? And I'm like, no, they were like, they would argue about where they were going to lunch, who was sitting where, what time they were leaving for the plane. But Gene, as you know, had this very kind of sharp, cynical, wicked sense of humor, where Roger was more of an open book. And, you know, because Gene was the kind of guy, he would be like, let's go to the track. I've got an inside tip on this horse. He had this little dice game he used to play that may or may not have been rigged over the years, but, you know, he just went. But he loved teasing Roger. So now this is pre 9/11, probably in the 90s, where there wasn't there was a lock maybe on the door to the cabin, but, you know, there wasn't all the security and stuff. So Roger and Gene were flying out to LA, probably be on the Tonight Show or whatever. They never sat together and I don't blame them, because even in my only little corner of the world, I never sat like across the aisle from Roger on a plane, because people get on the plane and go, ha, ha, you guys are sitting like, hey, you know, it's like, so they would sit separately, you know, 3 or 4 seats apart. So they're on a flight's in the air, they're on their way to LA, and the flight attendant hands Roger a note. And it says, "Oh, dear Mr. Ebert, I'm Captain Willoughby. I'm, you know, the captain on the flight today. We are huge fans of yours. We'd love to have you come visit the cockpit, meet the navigator, meet the first in charge and myself, and just say hello, and maybe we could snap a Polaroid picture. You know, please come on up." Now Roger gets up, and he walks by Gene, and he goes, "I got some fans in the cockpit." He knocks on the door, opens it because it's unopened, and the pilot's like, "Sir, what are you doing? You can't just come in here." Gene had written the note and had it handed to him. And he's like, "You fall for it every time, big boy, every single time." And to your question about lesser known films, if you will, and this is not exactly under the radar, but it was a film that did not do huge business when it came out. It was recently the 40th anniversary of Thief, starring James Caan. Has anybody had a chance ever to see Thief with James Caan? So Michael Mann, who went on to direct all kinds of huge movies, including Heat, which is considered maybe the greatest heist movie of all time. But this was his
and he's from Chicago, Michael Mann.
Yeah, Michael Mann's a Chicago guy as well. Created Miami Vice, tons of other stuff. This was his first movie as a director. So now, 1980, when they're filming this movie, got to remember where James Caan was at in his career. He was a huge star. He had done Sonny Corleone and The Godfather. He had done tons of other stuff in the 70s. He could pick and choose any role. He got the screenplay for this movie called Thief, filmed in Chicago, set in Chicago, and it's the story of a career jewel thief who gets involved in, you know, one last job, the cliched one last job, as it will, and then finds out he can't get out. That the guy who's hired him to do this is going to make him do more and more jobs, and it kind of goes sideways, and it's a brilliant film. James Caan played this character because he said he had never seen a heist movie where the characters seem real, and Tuesday Weld plays his girlfriend, and the two of them their characters have been through a lot. James Caan's Frank character had been in prison for 8 years. She had been involved with bad people. And there's an 11-minute scene at the Howard Johnson's at the O'Hare Oasis where the two of them sit at the table and tell each other's life stories, which is one of the great scenes in movie history. And Michael Mann said it there because he and his wife actually had a similar conversation at that table at the Howard Johnson's 10 years earlier. He's still married to her 55 years later.
Wow.
So that was also the first film for William Peterson. He has one line. He's the bouncer that tries to throw James Caan out of the bar. Jim Belushi plays James Caan's sidekick, and he was not well known at all then. He had not done any movies in his dramatic role, and he's great in it. Dennis Farina was still a Chicago cop at the time and was a technical advisor on the film. And Michael Mann saw something in him, and he goes, "You're going to play one of the henchmen in this movie. I'm putting you in front of the camera." And he actually has a shootout with James Caan. That's how Dennis Farina got into acting. But it's just, when you watch it, it's such a beautifully done film. Willie Nelson plays James Caan's old-time partner who's now in prison. There's some great scenes there. And I actually got a chance. I did this on a whim. James Caan recently joined Twitter, which is hilarious. James Caan just turned 81. And every time he sends a tweet out, he'll just say something like, "The Godfather was a great movie. End of tweet." But he always writes, "End of tweet" at the end of the tweet. And the coolest thing was, like, Kathy Bates said, like, "Happy birthday, Mr. Man," to him recently, and he goes, "I love you. End of tweet." And he followed me. James Caan followed me, and I was like, this is really cool because he's following 6 people. He doesn't have time for this shit. He just wants to say end of tweet. So I reached out to him, and long story short, I got a chance to interview him, to do a Zoom chat with James Caan about Thief specifically, which he made 40 years ago. And he had just gotten out of the hospital. He had serious back surgery because he had been a rodeo guy, a football player before he became a movie star, and then all those stunts and everything. So he was kind of, just getting over that. But he still looked and sounded exactly like Sonny Corleone. He still got those
Or the dad
shoulders.
in Elf, I say to the younger crowd.
That's what everybody said to me from a
the
certain
dad in
generation. They go,
Elf.
you talked to the dad in Elf? And I'm like,
Oh.
but he had such great memories and such great recall about making the movie. So of course, I went and rewatched it. And the other cool thing about Thief is it's filmed in Chicago locations that aren't necessarily always, there's not a bunch of those shots over the Chicago River or the Michigan Avenue skyline. It's like we're in Humboldt Park and we're over on the west side. It's very gritty. And Michael Mann he didn't invent it, but he made it very, very popular for directors. Every scene at night, it's got to be raining. So you get that cool noir look. But it's just such a great film. And then I had to ask him, I realized as I was talking to James Caan, it's not only the 40th anniversary of Thief, it's the 50th anniversary of Brian's Song. Whoa. He played Brian Piccolo, and Billy D. Williams played Gale Sayers in Brian's Song, which came out in the fall of 1971. For people who don't know, Brian Piccolo was running back for the Chicago Bears, he got cancer, and he died at the age of 26. So it's about their friendship, and it's maybe the only, one of the few. It was a made-for-TV movie on ABC7, Brian's Song, and it had such incredible ratings. They reran it like 2 days later, and then they put it in theaters. They put the TV movie in theaters because it was so well done. And when I told him that, he's like, holy shit, 50 years ago. I can't believe James Caan. Yeah. And when you go back and watch the movie, you see a lot of real-life Chicago Bears. Doug Buffone, Dick Butkus, Ed O'Bradovich, who still you hear on the radio now, playing themselves in the movie. And James Caan told me, he goes, after the movie came out, he goes, the Bears would come out to L.A. once a year because it was a smaller league at the time. They would play the Los Angeles Rams. So they play one game in Chicago, and then so he goes, yeah, those guys, Butkus, Buffone, O'Bradovich, they'd come to my house on the Saturday before the game, knock my door down. And I go, oh, they would just show up and knock on the door? He goes, no, they would knock my door down. They thought that was funny. My wife, who's now my ex-wife, didn't. Now there's your story.
There you go. Well, let's go through all the categories and eeny, meeny, miny, moe it for even sound editing, okay? So we can leave our audience, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience before we wrap it up. So
yeah, okay, so very quickly, we'll go through these. Actor in a supporting role will be, because we actually didn't get to that, right. That'll be Daniel Kaluuya for Judas and the Black Messiah. Original screenplay, The Trial of Chicago 7. Adapted screenplay will be Nomadland. Animated feature will be Soul, Pixar film. If you didn't have a chance to see that, I think it's in the top.
I was just going to say, I was going to ask you about that. You love it?
And with animated films too, I feel sometimes like everyone's like, oh, there's a Pixar movie up. I have no chance now. Thanks a lot. Documentary feature. Listen, I don't expect that anybody's seen any of these. So just go with my picks on these, and you might be okay.
Are there any though that you recommend in the documentary category?
Oh yeah,
a lot of documentary.
There's a ton of. They're all really, really good. Crip Camp actually is an interesting film. It's under the Obama families. They've got the production deal now, but it's about this camp for disabled teenagers back in the 70s, where there wasn't a lot of stuff like that, and they have a lot of the first-time campers 30 and 40 years later talking about how much that meant to them, where they could go to a camp where they didn't feel like ostracized or made fun of because everybody was the same. So Crip Camp. But I actually think for documentary feature, Time is the movie that will win. International feature film, Another Round is going to win. And I know a lot of people go, oh my gosh, I have to read because it's it's
subtitles. Yeah.
But Another Round, first of all, it's a great film, but it's also one of the more accessible of these films in recent years. It's about a bunch of middle-aged guys who decide that they're going to adopt Ernest Hemingway's attitude toward drinking, which is you start at about 8 o'clock in the morning and you stop at 5, but you never drink at night and you never drink on weekends.
So then it's okay, even if it's absinthe.
And what could possibly go right? So it's called Another Round. I actually think that's going to win. Original score, I will say Soul, the animated Pixar film. Original song will be Fight for You from Judas and the Black Messiah. Now, sound is interesting, too, because there used to be sound editing and sound mixing. That's why there used to be 24 categories. Now there's 23. They actually combined those two categories because actually the sound people were saying, Ryan can attest to this right over there, that there's kind of an overlap with the two. So they finally just said, you know what, let's just do one sound category. I think, Sound of Metal, because it's about a musician losing his hearing, and they do such a brilliant job of depicting that, will win for sound. And again, it's a picture that's got a supporting actor nomination, a Best Picture nomination. It won't win for that, but it'll be an Academy Award winner for Best Sound. That's still really cool. When your film wins an Academy Award in any category.
Yeah.
Makeup and hairstyling. Now, I want to go through these nominations really quick here for you. Emma, Hillbilly Elegy, Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Mank, and Pinocchio. Okay. In other news, apparently there was a movie called Pinocchio that came out. Because I didn't see it. But there was. Okay. I always think of that cartoon from back in the day.
Yeah, right?
But apparently there was a film. But I think it'll go to Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. You know, it's set in the 20s, and they really kind of capture that look. Costume design. Pinocchio. Another nomination for Pinocchio. 2-time Academy Award nominee, Pinocchio. Which means it got more nominations than To Five Bloods, so I have a problem with that.
So I'm guessing you didn't see it.
No, I actually didn't. I mean, I looked it up. It was a live-action film, but I mean, it went nowhere. Yeah. I think Ma Rainey's Black Bottom will win. Costume design and makeup and hairstyling, even though they are very different things, often go hand in hand. Cinematography. See, now here's another example of rewarding a film that's probably going to get shut out. Mank had the most nominations. I don't think it's going to win in any of the major categories, but it is in gorgeous, silvery black and white tones. It's a beautiful film to look at. So Mank wins for cinematography. Production design, probably Mank again, because they're recreating the studios in Hollywood in the 20s and 30s. It's pretty cool. Film editing, I think it's The Trial of Chicago 7, because they did a great job of going back and forth between the events and the trial, which are a year or so apart.
And by the way, just Mank, a minute. What did you think of that? How did you like it? Because there's been some wonderful conversations about it, and some not so wonderful.
I think it's a film you admire more than you love. It looks great. David Fincher's a great director. It's a cool story because his father, who has passed away, wrote the screenplay years ago. So he always wanted to tell the story. But the inside story of the guy that wrote Citizen Kane, to me, is not the most accessible story, and it's so consumed with the visuals that it kind of lost some of its, I think, heart and soul. And I love Gary Oldman, but he's 25 years old to be playing this guy, and sometimes that doesn't matter. In this case, it does, especially in the flashback sequences where Mank is this up-and-coming 26-year-old, and, Gary Oldman just played Winston Churchill. So it's a leap for me, Film editing, we mentioned this Trial of Chicago 7, right? Visual effects. This is another one where you'll get a film that will get one Academy Award. The Midnight Sky, the George Clooney film, which I actually really liked, but left a lot of people cold. It did very, very well on Netflix, but it has great visual effects. Now, when we get into documentary, short subject, short film, live action, short film, animated, have I seen these films? Yes, because they send them all to me. Is it a crapshoot trying to figure out what's going to win? Absolutely. So take my picks with a grain of salt. But for documentary, short subject, it's going to be A Love Song for Latasha. For short film, live action, it's going to be The Letter Room. And for short film animated, it's going to be If Anything Happens, I Love You. And I picked the two films that have love in the title because I think half of the voters probably don't watch these films either, but go, oh, that must be a love story. So, but that's how you win the ballot. You gotta get those small categories. I mean, I've had some years where I got 14 out of 14 in all the categories that you've heard of, and then I miss all the other ones, and I'm like, oh, damn you, live action short.
They always get you in the live action short. I had a couple of emails before we started this from people who are going to be live streaming asking two questions of you, Richard Roeper. Are we live streaming at the moment, Brian? Okay, that's always good to know as I speak to a camera. What is your favorite comedy shot in Chicago, and what is your favorite drama shot in Chicago?
Blues Brothers on both ends. There you go. There's your answer. Oh, wow. Comedy shot in Chicago. Well, we talked about a lot of them.
Any John Hughes movie.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Blues Brothers just because it encompasses so much. It's also, you could say it's your favorite musical shot in and around Chicago. They did do some scenes for Blues Brothers on sound stages and in L.A., but obviously tons of it, In fact, they're just doing repair work on the bridge where they took out the Illinois Nazis, which was awesome when they took out and that bridge I know is undergoing repairs. Right. And then the Daily Plaza is really the Daily Plaza. But for example, the Aretha Franklin number, I believe, was shot elsewhere. But yeah, so I'm going to go with Blues Brothers. Drama, well, we just talked about The Fugitive, and that's definitely high up on my list. I mean,
Thief.
And Thief. In The Untouchables is way up there too. And what I love about The Untouchables is it made such great use of the fact that there are certain parts of Chicago that can be 1920 Chicago or 1930 Chicago, like LaSalle Street, that you don't really have to do much to it, other than just put some old cars on the side of the road and dress up the extras in costumes, because they look the same way. So The Untouchables is way up there as well.
Okay. Does anyone in the audience have a question that we can ask before we sign off? Yes, in the way back. Go ahead. That's a good question. How do you feel about the expansion of Best Picture to so many categories? Because it used to be, what, 5?
It used
and now
to be
it's
5
9?
nominees. Yeah, it is a great question. Actually, if you go way back in the history of the Academy, they used to have 8 or 9 or 10 films nominated. Then they went to the 5 for a long time. And the truth is, they expanded it again. It's now usually 8. It can be as many as 10. They have a voting system that makes Georgia look like the pristine and streamlined. It's you vote, then you vote again, then you vote for this one and that one. But the truth is, it's done as a marketing tool more than anything else, because now you have 8 films that get to advertise themselves for home video or streaming. Academy Award nominee for Best Picture forever. So it was also a way that the Academy was recognizing, as we talked about, that most of the films that were being nominated when there were only 5 were not big commercial hits. So now you all of a sudden had room for Black Panther to be nominated for Best Picture. We knew it probably wasn't going to win. Maybe it should have. But at least, again, it was nominated for Best Picture. So that's really why it was expanded, more for promotional purposes than anything else.
Excellent. Anyone else have some questions? Yes, go ahead. Stand up or...
Yeah, that the question is, if,
Yes.
movies that would have done better with more nominations, people saw them in the theater. I think we go back to Da 5 Bloods, the Spike Lee film, which was an epic, in terms of the focus and scale of it, that if people had a chance to see that in a theater. A lot of the Best Picture nominees I'm looking at, like for example, Nomadland, as much as I love it, it's not a film I say, oh, you have to see that in a theater. Again, because they're not usually big spectacles that win Academy Awards. I did talk a little bit about News of the World, the Tom Hanks film, which is set in kind of the frontier land. I think that would have done better. Tom Hanks still has built-in box office appeal, and I think it got kind of lost in the streaming because everything was coming out at the end of the year. If it had been playing in theaters like in October, I think that would have done better.
Excellent. Anyone else? Yes, go ahead. Stand up. I see you in the white shirt. Awesome.
The question is about the disputes between Siskel and Ebert and then Roger and myself.
Santa Claus 2 and the Farting Reindeer. Yes, I love it.
I'll tell you another one, because this one's on YouTube, so people send me these things all the time. There was the remake of The Honeymooners, or the movie version of The Honeymooners, which I did not think was very good, and also a remake of War of the Worlds, Spielberg, Tom Cruise, and he gave thumbs up to The Honeymooners and thumbs down to War of the Worlds, and we got into this whole thing. I go so you're telling people this weekend when you're going to the theaters, you should spend your money on The Honeymooners and not on War of the Worlds. And Roger got really mad because he goes, it doesn't work that way. Forget about the stupid thumbs. I'm saying this movie, for what it wanted to be, The Honeymooners did what it wanted to do, and the War of the Worlds fell short. I'm not saying it's cinematically more accomplished, and I just went, yeah, but you gave the one the thumbs up, the other the thumbs down. And you forget about the effing thumbs. And I'm like, I can't. You invented them with Gene, which was a lot of fun. But also, first of all, he made a great point. And I listened to that and learned from that through the years, that you do have to review a movie for what it was supposed to be and what it wanted to be. So sometimes like I mentioned Godzilla versus King Kong earlier. I gave it 3 stars because it's a big, dumb monster movie that does a really good job of being a big, dumb monster movie. That's what it wants to be. Yes, the dialogue is ridiculous when someone says, Kong bows to no one. You're supposed to go like, are you kidding me? Things like that. but it succeeded at what it wanted to be. And I get what Roger's saying. You know, certain films have higher ambition. So sometimes people say, I can't believe you gave that dumb comedy 3 stars, but that serious drama 2.5. And I'm like, well, because I think that one succeeded more at what it wanted to be. In that same vein, by the way, if you go on YouTube, more than Roger and me, but there are some disagreements between Gene and Roger that they're on YouTube. And some of my favorites are got nothing to do with movies. We used to do promos. You know, you do that thing where you go, hey, tune in to Siskel and Ebert, 8:30 Saturday night. We're going to be reviewing this. So they would do them. And there's like a 9-minute epic YouTube of them fighting with each other over a 15-second promo saying they're going to review No Way Out starring Kevin Costner. And one interrupts the other, you didn't say that name right. Then the other one says, that's not when we're on in Dallas. You got to do it again. And at one point, I think, I could be wrong, one of them says, well, just tune in for Me and the Asshole next Tuesday. I mean, because they were so mad at each other, and I was like, you guys. And they thrived on that. But, I mean, geez,
Anyone else have some? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, the question, 2-part question. First about Riz Ahmed in The Sound of Metal. I think the fact that he got nominated is pretty special because we talked about Tom Hanks, for example, not getting nominated. So it was recognized. And I agree with you. What he did in that movie is pretty special. But no, I do disagree. I think Chadwick Boseman, God bless if he's still with us, he was going to get nominated for sure. Does sentiment play a part in voting? It always does. There are times where someone's at the end of their career and they get an Oscar. There's also a lot of Lifetime Achievement Awards that aren't called that. I mean, Al Pacino won Best Actor for Scent of a Woman, which is like his 57th best movie. And Paul Newman won for Color of Money, which I actually like, which was actually shot in Chicago, the sequel to The Hustler. But even Paul Newman would have told you that was not, the best performance. Work. He had done better work that hadn't been recognized. Although sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Remember when Lauren Bacall was nominated late in her career and she lost, I think, to Julia Ormond. I love Lauren Bacall, but the look on her face when she realized she'd come to the Oscars at like the age of 85 and wasn't going to win, you did not want to get in her way the rest of that night, man.
Absolutely not. Great question. Thank you for that. Anyone else? I can't see hands. Is there a hand in the way back? No? Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for supporting this theater to try to help us keep our doors open because everything that you pay for here, we are a nonprofit after all, and so that's a tax write-off for you and helping us keep the lights on for us. So we appreciate you. Everyone at home, thank you, thank you, thank you. We hope that you'll tune in next time. And of course, many events coming down the pike, so please open those emails if they come to you here at the Wilmette Theater. If there's a category that you didn't mention, did you do sound editing and all that stuff?
Well,
You did
them
them all. Okay,
I
good.
did them twice.
Please leave this for us at the, is my son still here? Britt, are you still here? Is my child?
That was an unproduced John Hughes
yeah,
screenplay. Is my son still here?
Yeah,
They never made that movie, but they should have, actually.
Anyway, I was going to make him have the job of collecting your things, but if not, we'll put them in the table on the way out. Please make sure you put an email so I can contact you if you win. The Oscars are when, Rich?
April 25th, a week from this Sunday, so about 10 days out.
A week from this Sunday. And so we will make sure that the winner either gets some booze on us or some shows on us, but we'll make it worth your while just as a way of saying thank you for supporting your local theater. Thank you to Rich for making it here. We're so grateful for your time. And thank you to you all.
Great crowd.
Have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks to everybody who watched from home
Thank
as well.
you, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you.